Hello, I'm back. How long's it been? Like 2 months? I can't really remember. But the good news is I have officially entered my 20s, meaning that I am really, really old. So, in celebration of this milestone, let's watch some cartoons. I had always planned to review the 3 direct-to-video DC films released this year. So far, I've done Red Sun, and with the release of Apocalypse War, I have bought it and will be tackling it later down the track. But in between the release of these films, I didn't realize that Warner Bros. Animation did a direct-to-video Mortal Kombat movie, and when I heard that, I got worried. Now for context, I'm not foreign to the series. I used to play them all the time when I was younger, and it is one of my favourite video game franchises. Hell, it's my second favourite in the realm of fighting games, right behind Smash Bros. It's just that, it's a video game movie. And, I don't know if you know, but most of them suck. Even the ones that aren't that bad are just mediocre at best, or so bad they're good. So I didn't have any real expectation for it to live up to. So before I watched it, I checked out who was behind the scenes, and I was quite surprised. The film was directed by Ethan Spalding, who is kind of a famous name in the Warner Bros. Direct-to-DVD market. Before this, I only knew him as the director of Scooby-Doo Legend of the Phantosaur, which is how he got that Shaggy meme, and directing some of the installments in the DC universe. But looking through his IMDb, he has done tons over the years. He directed a few episodes of Avatar, he was one of the producers on the 2011 Thundercats reboot, and he's done a bunch of work in the art department on tons of movies and TV shows. But finding that out wasn't the big surprise, as some of the video game voice actors were attached, most notably Steve Blum reprising Sub-Zero and Patrick Seitz reprising Scorpion. Outside of the games, Kevin Michael Richardson came back to reprise Goro, a role he undertook back in the 1995 film, and hell, the co-creator of the whole franchise, Ed Boon, was a credited producer. So there were people that knew what they were doing and understood what made Mortal Kombat an awesome series. And holy fuck did it pay off, because this film was awesome! Like my previous video on Stargirl, it completely took me by surprise with how much I liked it. So, what are we waiting for? Let's jump in! Starting off, the animation was fantastic, especially comparing it to their previous film. If you saw my Red Sun review, one of my biggest gripes was its obviously rushed animation, which resulted in a very cheap aesthetic. So after witnessing that, I was quite skeptical with the direction they would take this one. And fuck, did they take it somewhere, to the point where this further downgrades Red Sun and makes it look like Control-Alt-Delete. And though it isn't perfect, there are still some very jerky movements here and there are times where the flash animation rears its ugly head, but it was just so much better. Okay, I just realized I said flash animation. I don't know if they used flash animation, but what I was trying to say is that some of the scenes looked very Flash-esque with just how the characters were moving. Back to the actual review now. The best aspect was definitely its use of colour, prominently expressed through shading, which is an aspect I remember Spalding utilised in Legend of the Phantosaur, which looked great and definitely added to its production value as it was one of the best looking Scooby-Doo films. The backgrounds definitely evoke a very graphic novel aesthetic. I think the best set pieces were the scenes in Shanghai and Johnny Cage's house, as they were the most visually appealing, mainly because of their sketchy rough textures, which again resemble something out of a graphic novel. And this design does allow it to stand apart from the more slicker looking DC films. The fight choreography was so well done, and out of all the direct-to-DVD products they've made, this beats them all by a landslide in that area. The animation's really smooth, it's very well shot with a lot of creative angles, it's very over the top, but most importantly, it's also incredibly faithful to the source material. One of the most integral parts of any fighting game is each character's individual moveset. So what they did was take those characters' movesets and place them in the film. You would think that's a no-brainer, but all the other video game adaptations I've seen either go off and do their own thing without taking into account what they have to work with, or just do a very piss-poor job of it. But when you have people who know what they're doing, it really shows how much care and detail they put into this product, which just adds to the fun. And though some of them are a little sporadic and out of nowhere, it was still fun watching those fight scenes, which also leads me into one of the best parts. This was the first Mortal Kombat film to be rated R, or MA-15, and holy shit did they deliver! This takes the over-the-top gore and bloodshed from the games and runs with it to the extreme. They even included the X-ray shots from the more recent installments, which are just brutal to watch. And though this is a violent movie, it's not that bad. I mean, at times the guts look like cartoon ham, so no one's going to be turning this off in disgust. But just take a look at some of this.
That's for my clan!
It has more in common with something like Kill Bill, so that pretty much tells you what you're going to be in for. Sticking with the source material, there were also tons of references to other characters, catchphrases, locations, and of course, fatalities. And though a few of these references were quite forced at points and came out of nowhere, they didn't really leave a bad impression, just more of an underwhelming one. But being a fan of the series does help in appreciating it more, but even I can't say how faithful the characters are adapted, as I don't know that much about MK's lore, I just know the basics. But from what I have seen, I think they did a great job. No character felt like a complete diversion from the games, and even the ones that had very limited screen time, instead of just dumping them in as lazy fan service, they instead managed to faithfully maintain iconic elements of their personality besides the looks. I mean, not even Mortal Kombat Annihilation could get that right. It was very well paced, there were no elements of the narrative that felt rushed, and basically everyone had their time to shine. Except Sub-Zero, that kinda sucked, but besides that I found the rest to be very impressive considering not only the 80-minute runtime, but also the fact that recent Warner Bros. Direct-to-DVD films never really have the best pacing. The screenplay was fine, nothing special, but there were moments where I thought improvements needed to be made, or at least one more proofread, as some parts were written in a way that felt very unnatural, and as a result the voice performances on these parts slipped into this robotic state that sounded like a shitty Godzilla dub.
I will take pleasure in ripping your flesh from your bones!
Speaking of voice performances, they were also quite passable, a few bad ones here and there, but I do blame that more on the screenplay. And my last negative take, and this in no way affects the film's quality, but instead the advertising, as I found it to be very misleading. You see, the movie's called Mortal Kombat Legends Scorpion's Revenge, so going into it I was expecting this to be a sort of standalone spin-off to the franchise focused solely on Scorpion, a bit like those two failed spin-off action-adventure games from the late 90s, with of course a few bits and pieces here and there if they were ever going to develop this into another expanded universe. And there is a great deal of time devoted to Scorpion, like the movie opens with his origins and him getting his revenge is the narrative's emotional core. But it's actually more focused on the Mortal Kombat tournament. We see all the fan favourite characters, and for basically the majority of the second act he kinda just takes a breather. So my question is, why didn't they just call this Mortal Kombat? I have a theory they chose this longer title because next January we are getting a James Wan produced live action reboot, and for the average viewer, having two movies called Mortal Kombat coming out less than a year apart might be a bit confusing. So that's how I see it. But also I want to add that I really doubt they can do any better. I mean, it's coming out in January, and as we all know, only good movies come out in January. So to end this off, Mortal Kombat Legends Scorpion's Revenge is 100% the best video game movie so far this year. Suck it, Sonic! And also, I do consider this to be the best video game adaptation I've ever seen. So finally, after all these years, I can now stop saying that the 1995 Mortal Kombat film is the best one. This could have easily been bad, but instead they created an entertaining, fun, violent, and most importantly, incredibly faithful product. At the end of the movie, they hint at a sequel, and knowing them, it will most likely take around 1 to 2 years for it to release. And all I can say about that is, I can't wait. Better not be that fucking live action film.